Hey, welcome back. So glad you could join us again. I'm your host, Ryan Rice, and this is my beautiful wife, Maida.
Hello again. So glad you guys are with us. Or you on the other side of the camera.
But what we want to talk about today is not moving too fast or too slow, right? Don't make decisions just up, let's go. And definitely don't wait forever and just never live again. Like life continues, so should you.
Right. And I think I'm such a bad example and don't stop living because I stopped living.
Right. Well, the reason we picked this topic was because you and I are on opposite sides of the spectrum.
100%.
I went too dang fast and you went too slow. You kind of stopped and said, nope, everything's done. I died because my husband died, so I died. I said, all right, I'm done grieving. I'm done. And it's like, oh, it's been an hour. I don't care. I'm done. I was sad. Now I'm over it. You know, to the point where, because I'm an engineer, I think in my head a lot, right? I'm very safe in my head. So a lot went on when Asia died, right? We took her to the hospital at night. They called me early in the morning and it was, they called me early in the morning, get to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, by that point, I had shut off my emotions completely. And I was 100% logical. And I said, okay, what's the next step? Because that's all I could do. Like when somebody calls you and says, hey, you're the emergency contact for so-and-so, you should probably get here. Your wife just collapsed.
Now, they called you at 5 in the morning.
Right.
So what did you do then? So it was 5 in the morning. They called you and said she collapsed.
Right.
Or she was dead already, or we're trying to. What did they say?
Yeah, so they woke me up. It was weird because I'd FaceTimed her the night before, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? They're like, oh, they're gonna give me some IV and send me home. And I said, oh, cool. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, naive me. And then they called me and said, hey, is this Ryan Rice? I said, yeah. Hey, you're the emergency contact for Asia. She just collapsed. You should probably get here. I'm like, I should get there? Okay. What do you mean I should? Like, stupid wording. But yeah, they said, you should probably get here. I said, okay. So I was in the room with all my kids because I didn't like sleeping alone back then. I went outside, knocked on my neighbor's door and woke them up, and they were very, very mad, like I would be. 5 in the morning, they're like, what do you want? And we were friends. It was okay. But I said, hey, I think my wife just died in the hospital. Can you watch my kids? They're all asleep. They're okay. Just make sure, somebody's there when they wake up. And their face changed and they're like, oh my gosh. Oh, and I was starting to process things. Like I went through denial. I said, oh, this is going to be a crazy story to tell Asia when she wakes up. Right. Like things like that. I'm like, oh, you died for a minute. Like that's crazy. No, it wasn't for a minute. It was permanent. But yeah, I went through kind of denial, and then I drove to the hospital, and when I got there, I went in the ER, and I'm like, where's my wife? And they're like, she's not here. I said, what the heck are you talking about? She's not here. You just called me. And so I went back out to my car to try to find whoever called me, and they called me again and said, hey, we've got some bad news. And I said, oh, you can't wait till I get there? And he said, I am so sorry. And I got really mad. And he said, your wife just died. And I said, where in the world are you? And I may have said some colorful language. But I said, where in the world are you? And they're like, oh, we're at this hospital. And I said, why am I at this other hospital? Like, you guys didn't think to tell me? Oh, by the way, we changed hospitals in the middle of the night. So I drove over to the hospital, went to the ER. She wasn't there either. I had to find what building. There's like 6 buildings. Found the building, and when I walked in the door, by then, like I'd already called everybody. I called my mom. I called Asia's parents, and I was like, hey, something's going on. You probably should come deal with this. But by then, my emotions had shut off completely. And I was like, we're logical. Like I walked in the door, and I was stone-faced. And I was like, you can't hurt me anymore. There's nothing there to hurt. But one thing, and this is a crazy story too. When I took Asia to the hospital that night, I had the thought, hey, you should probably call her parents and let her know she's in the hospital. And I said, they're just going to give her some IV and send her home. I didn't think it was a big deal because that's what they told us. I took her to the Instacare the night before. They did some blood work, sent us home. And then they called and said, hey, blood work came back. Looks like there's an issue. Nothing to be worried about, though. Not a big deal. But you might want to think about going to the ER. And I said, what? I might want to think about it? That's very passive language. I might want to think about it. They're like, yeah, you might want to get there as soon as possible, whenever you can.
So it was very confusing. You didn't think it was really a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? So you probably thought that nothing was going to happen, that she was just going to come back home
right.
the next day.
Yeah. I was like, not a big deal, right? So we took her to the hospital. I had the distinct impression, you need to call Asia's dad and let him know that she's in the hospital. And I blew it off, and I wish I wouldn't have. That was a mistake. But I had that thought. I said, I'll call him tomorrow. I'll have Asia call him tomorrow when she gets out, right? Because logical. And so the next morning, right after they called me from the hospital and said your wife died, I called Asia's dad, and I worded it so terribly. You would have been so ashamed. But I called him. I said, hey, Tony, are you working today? And he's like, no, not today. What's up? Because it was the day before Thanksgiving, right?
Right.
Nobody's working. So he's like, no, I'm not working today. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because I was thinking, I'm like, and I said, if you're working, don't worry about it. I was going to tell you something, but don't worry about it. What was I thinking? Right? I'm like, your daughter just died. But yeah, I was like, hey, if you're not working, would you mind coming up and watching the kids for a little bit today? And he said, yeah, we can do that. What's going on? I said, well, Asia died.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't have anybody to watch the kids. A neighbor's there at my house right now, and I'm headed to the hospital. And I'm sure he, his heart dropped.
This is his daughter you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you told him just a very common thing. Asia died. Can you watch the kids?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, when you say I word things bad, I word things bad. Yeah. Really bad. Yeah. It was terrible because my brain wasn't working. I didn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't believe she was gone. I was just like, well, and then when I heard myself say it, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I don't even know what that means to not have my wife there anymore.
That sounded terrible.
Yeah, it was.
And just the sound of it, like, I don't have my wife just died.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you supposed to do with that information?
Right. And it was, but yeah, I called him and I said, hey, could you watch the kids? Asia died. I didn't really want to say that out loud. It was terrible.
Because you were in denial.
Yeah. So then
that's just really hard. I'm sorry I'm cutting you off.
Go for it.
I just wanted to say, I mean, at that moment, what else are you supposed to do? What else are you supposed to say? I mean, how do you word that?
Yeah.
Especially they called you at 5 a.m. You were not really awake. And the first thing you wake up with is your wife just died.
Yeah, she just collapsed. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. They said, oh, she was on the way to the bathroom and collapsed. I said, oh. And then they called me, when I was at the hospital, the other hospital, and they're like, she died. She didn't come back.
Right. Like, oh. And then in the hospital, before everybody came to see her, I mean, did you say your goodbye? You were able to say goodbye to her? You say your goodbyes? I don't know if you did or not.
So with me, it was interesting. Anytime we left each other, I always said, I love you. That was the last thing I always said. I was like, hey, honey, I love you. Just so you know. I'd end every phone call with I love you. I'd end, anytime I would leave for work, I said, I love you. And so when she left, she went to the ER, walked in the emergency room. And before she left, I grabbed her hand and I said, honey, I love you. And she said, I love you too. And she went. And then the last time I talked to her, she called me, she FaceTimed me at night, and the kids, she's like, I want to talk to the kids. And the kids were hyper and doing their thing. But we ended it and just said, I love you. I'll talk to you in the morning. And that was it.
And then the morning never really came.
Right.
You were never able to talk to her again. That was like the last thing you said to her.
So then, yeah, she was dead when they called me. And when they called me, I woke up better than I usually do. It's usually hard for me to wake up, and I'm groggy and disoriented. I woke up pretty clear, knowing something was wrong. And it was weird. I almost expected the phone call. I woke up and I thought, I woke up and I'm like, there it is. I said, hello. And I wasn't like, hello, like I normally am. I woke up and I'm like, hello. And they're like, hey, is this Ryan? Yeah, this is him. Hey, you're the emergency contact for Asia. I'm like, oh,
right.
Here we go.
And then at the hospital, though, you had mentioned before that you sitting there outside of her room or maybe in her room, you started thinking about selling your house right away or never coming back.
Yeah. So because I was 100% logical, I wasn't emotional at that point. I did a couple things. I walked up, I got in the elevator, walked over to the room and found the doctor that was looking for somebody that was grieving. And I'm like, that's the guy, right? You can tell when they're looking for you. I grabbed the doctor, young guy, and I'm like, you are probably the low man on the totem pole that gets to talk to me. Grabbed him and he's like, hey, I'm so sorry, trying to comfort me and stuff. And I'm like, let's just stop that right away. Show me the room. And I walked in and there was her body and she wasn't there. I could tell she wasn't there anymore. Her body was, but that wasn't my wife. I'm like, that's not my wife. I don't know what that is, but that's not my wife. That looks like her, but that's not her. And so he left. And I sat there and he's like, oh, you want me to shut the door for privacy? And I said, no, I don't want to be in a room with a dead body. What's wrong with you?
Wow.
I'm like, ugh. Just because I so disassociated it. I'm like, that's not my wife anymore. My wife is not here. This is just her body. That's not her. And so I called one of my friends and I said, well, I guess I'll tell people. So I called one of my friends and I forgot I can't call him. I have to text him. It doesn't go through. So I sent him a text, and this is how bad it was. I took that text and copied it and just texted it to a bunch of people when I should have made a phone call. And they started calling me really quick, right? When you say, hey, my wife died, we're figuring things out. People tend to call you back.
Well, that's your logical self was just taking it as a, like a normal thing that happens every day.
It was just a checklist.
You sent a text message saying that your wife had just passed away.
Yep. I was like, hey, I'm not going to be in work. My wife died.
And that was it.
Yep.
Right. For me, it was so different because for me, they called me I was in the hospital already and they said, hey, you can come and see your husband. But they didn't say, you're going to say goodbye to your husband.
Right.
But when they told me they were going to disconnect him, I told the doctors, are you okay? There's nothing else you can do. Are you sure that there's nothing else that you can possibly do? And I even knelt on my knees. I grabbed her hands and I said, are you sure that there's nothing else that can be done? And then there was maybe, I want to say 3 doctors in that room. And to each one of them, I would grab their hands and I would look at them in their eyes and I'd be like, are you sure? Are you 100% sure that there's nothing? You cannot think about anything else. You haven't done research about anything else. Because there were older doctors that have done research.
Right.
And they just kept looking at me and saying, no, or just, they're just like, no, we're going to disconnect him and that's it. And they were very cold. Very cold. And so I could not believe that there was nothing else that they could do, or at least tell me, you know what, we're going to leave him alive for maybe, for a little bit, for you to say goodbye. For me, it was like, we're going to disconnect him and say goodbye right now because we got to move on. We're going to the next, for me, it sounded like client.
It was a very transactional
just because, and especially because it was COVID.
Right.
And so the hospital was full of people. Full of people. And so they were already used to people dying. And they're like, oh, this is just another person that died. Say goodbye. And that's it. And get out of here. you know. And so for me, I kept touching my husband's hand. I kept grabbing his feet. I kept touching his face, and I'm like, honey, you're strong enough. You can do this. Prove to them that you're strong enough. Come back to me. Open your eyes and stand up. Sit up. Do something. Don't let them do this to you. We haven't even chosen the name of our baby. There's no way that you're dying. Prove to them how strong you are. I was not taking that as a real thing. For me, it wasn't real. For me, it wasn't possible. It was not possible that he was dying. It was not possible that they were gonna disconnect him. And even when they disconnected him and I saw him flatlined, I still believed deep down inside that somehow a miracle was gonna happen, like one of those huge miracles that you see on the Bible, and that somebody was gonna do that miracle for me and was gonna rise him up from the dead. So I said, okay, I'm going to go down to labor and delivery, check how my baby is. And I went home with praying, right, the whole time that a miracle was going to happen and believing that a miracle was going to happen. And so I would go and visit him at the mortuary that was 2 blocks away from my house. And for about a week, because we didn't know, I was still planning. I didn't know where when the funeral was going to be. I didn't know what cemetery. My family was not in town, so it was just me by myself in Utah. And during that time that I had, I would drive down to the mortuary to go visit him. And I would just sit there and be like, you're going to come back. You're going to come back. Or I would drive down and I would be like, where is he? I know I'm going to see him just walking down the street to come back home. That's how bad I was. And I just didn't want to believe that he was dead. For me, he was not dead. It was a mistake that they told me that he was dead.
Yeah. And I know you told me too, you used to bring blankets.
Right.
Because you thought he was cold.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. I had blankets, and they told me at the mortuary, they're like, no, we have a blanket. And I'm like, he's cold. He's cold. He can be. So he didn't have any clothes, obviously. So they were kind of covering him with tiny, I think it was still a blanket or a tiny sheet from the hospital, mm-hmm. or in his hospital gown or something like that. And I'm like, he's cold. He needs to have something. And so they did bring a huge comforter for him, and they kind of looked at me weird. And I'm like, my husband is cold. And so, yeah, I just didn't want to believe that he was gone.
Right.
Like, there was no way. And I would still, like, touch his body. I would look at him. He had a long beard, and I would think and say, how could you not prepare for this when you were going out? Why didn't you even shave? Why did you not, just normal things that I was going through that were going through my mind, and kind of like me it's not like I would talk to him, but like in my mind, I would just go through things like, why didn't you shave? Why didn't you cut your beard? Why didn't you do this? Instead of thinking, oh, you're gone, what is the next step? Oh, I need to find a plot. Or I need to prepare for the funeral. I need to plan it. For me, none of that was in my mind.
Right.
For me, it was more emotional than anything. Mm-hmm. It was not logical at all. And in fact, I was worried that my friends would see me like I was going crazy, because I was this pregnant lady that kept saying he's going to come back sometime soon.
Yep. Yeah. For me, when I was in that hospital room, while I was sitting there texting people, it's crazy that I say that. While I was texting people that my wife was dead, very bluntly, like I am, I went through and I said, what's the logical step here? I'm like, I'm single now. I'm alone. I have 3 kids, and I work. Well, I worked down in Utah County. I said, well, my mom's down there. My late wife's family's down there. I'll do this. I said, I'll move down there. My mom can help me with the kids because she works from home. That'll work. They're in school anyway, so not a big deal. But I'll put them in school with their cousins down there. And then while I'm at work, they'll hang out with their cousins for a couple hours, and then I'll grab them, and we'll be at my mom's house. So then I'm not alone. They're not alone. They're with family. Everybody can grieve together. That makes sense. So what I did was I said, okay, it's Wednesday today. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. We'll do that. Friday, I'll be up in my house. I'll clean it out. I'll take Friday, Saturday, clean it out, and I'll have it listed on Monday. And that's about what happened. I took Friday, Saturday, cleaned out the house, emptied it completely, way too fast. Got rid of a lot of stuff because I was moving into my mom's house, and I'm like, well, I don't need a stove anymore. Don't need a fridge anymore. Don't need washer and dry anymore. I got rid of most of my stuff, and I went boom, 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 100% logical, and it was too fast. And the danger there is you miss things. Like, you look back and you're like, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have thrown that away, or I could have handled that differently. Or I didn't need to sell my house. It wasn't a money thing. It was I never want to see that house again thing. I don't want to see those clothes. I don't want to see those shoes. I don't want to see that wall. None of it. I never want to touch my bed again. I got really angry, and I kept it quiet like I shouldn't, but I did. I got really angry, and I said, I never want to see any of this again, ever. And so I didn't. I kind of destroyed the relic of the life I had with Asia, and I completely shifted our lives. So then 100% it would never be the same. It was too much. It was a lot of change all at once, and I easily could have taken a couple weeks, a month or two or so, and done that whole process, gone through everything, made sure I had journals and everything, and done it much more organized. But I couldn't sit there. The worst thing for me was sitting there doing nothing, because when I wasn't doing anything, my brain was working, and my brain overthinks. And then I start feeling, and I didn't want to feel. I did anything I could to not feel because it hurt. Anytime I was alone, I would sit there and cry all the time. And I mentally, I didn't understand it. Mentally, I thought, I get it. My wife's dead, but come on. I'm done with this. Like, I'm done being sad. I'm done being angry. Let's move on. And my heart wasn't ready for that. It was, I didn't take the time to grieve and go through that tunnel. And so I just shut off the emotions, and I got stuck for a little bit. Right. And so then I had to open up the valve a little bit and be like, okay, little by little, I'll let myself feel, but it still hurt until I opened it up completely. And I said, no, I'm going to take the time that I need and truly feel what I'm feeling and not be afraid of it.
Yeah. No, it's definitely really hard when you're in that moment and you just turn logical because you don't want to feel.
Right.
I didn't want to feel either, but instead of going logical, I went extreme. I don't know. What do you want to call it? Instead of going logical, I went...
I think you went in denial.
I went 100% in denial, but like extreme denial.
Right. To the point where your closet didn't change for over a year.
No. I left it the same. I left his stuff where he left them. The bathroom stuff, the closet, the shoes, even his toothpicks that he had. I didn't touch anything, and I didn't want anything moved.
Right.
If anybody would move something, I would get so angry because I would say, that's how Tyler left it. Nobody touches it. Even like a little stain, if there was anything on a piece of clothing. I wanted it all. Mm-hmm. I would sleep with his suits. With his suit coat, because he was a 6'7" big guy, and the suit coat for me was kind of like a blanket. And I would sleep with it. I wanted to smell him. I wanted to remember what it felt like to sleep by him. I would get up at night because I was super pregnant. So when you're in that stage of pregnancy, you get up and you go to the bathroom a lot. You pee a lot, and I would get up at night and I would talk to him and I'd be like, hey, honey, look how big my belly is. Because he never really got to see my rounded belly like how he got. We were very excited to go through that stage of pregnancy because with our NICU baby, we didn't really get to see that. my belly was pretty little when he was born. And 10 years before, we didn't even remember what it was like to be pregnant because we were more stressed than anything. We had no idea what we were going to do with our first one. So we took it for granted, I feel like. And so this pregnancy was a big deal. And I would wake up at night and be like, look how big it is. I'm sure you're going to come back by the time this baby is born, right? Or just things like that. And I would watch movies where, like this movie called Ghost, where the guy is there still after his fiance and he still talks to her. She can't see him, she can't hear him, but he's there. And so I'm like, Tyler is with me. And I would also feel him and I would feel his presence. I obviously never saw him, I never heard him or anything like that. But I wanted to. And I said, well, in case he's here, I want to talk to him. And so I would say little things like that. I was so, I was extremely sad. I was extremely depressed. So I didn't want anybody touching anything. One day I went to school because I went back to school and I saw my mom in my room. And I said, what are you doing here? And I saw her with a bunch of boxes and she was folding the clothes of Tyler. And I started crying. And I said, how dare you touch those clothes? They were still in the closet how he had left them. And nobody had touched them for a year. Why would you do that? And my mom said, it is time. And I am grateful she did that. But at the same time, I feel like she didn't give me that space. But I also needed that. Because it was too much. It was too much because I was doing it. I was getting sick from it, right? It was not a thing of, oh, I just want to leave it still there because I'm just not ready. No, I thought he was gonna come back, and it was time for me, like my mom was telling me, to realize that no, Maida, he's not gonna come back. So you need to move on, and I didn't want to move on. So seeing the clothes in the closet was kind of like my comforting blanket for me. Mm-hmm. Because I'm like, oh, everything is just as he left it because it's going to come back. When I saw the closet empty on his side, that's the day that I felt that he was truly, truly gone.
Yeah. When you're dealing with somebody that's going through grief like that, you just got to be patient. You got to understand they're trying their best to make it through this. But they've never been through it before, hopefully. And they don't know what they're doing. They're trying to make logical decisions. They're not going to be logical. Most things are emotional. It's not going to make sense. They're going to be mad. They're going to throw fits. And it's going to be really hard. But the best thing you can do is show up for them. Just be there for them. Take them by the hand and help them, right? Don't ask what they need. Don't ask what they need for help, right? They don't know. They don't know how to help themselves. You just got to take charge. And so, if you're helping clean out the house and stuff, it's hard. I know a lot of people, when their elderly parents pass away, they usually take their mom or dad or whoever the surviving spouse is, take them out, go to dinner or something, and the family cleans out the house while they're gone. Because that process of cleaning things out, that's rough.
It is horrible.
Everything has a memory.
It is horrible. It was so painful for me.
Yeah.
It was so painful. And even then, I told my mom, will you please at least not get rid of it? So she folded it, put it in a box, and took it downstairs in the basement. Yep. And that made me feel a lot better.
Yeah. So there's ways you can compromise and just be sensitive to how people are feeling, even when they're acting crazy, right? Like for example, when I started selling my stuff, right, I emptied my house and got it ready to sell. If somebody would have told me to stop, I would have been furious. I would have absolutely been furious. Just because I would have been like, this is my house, I can do whatever I want. And in that moment, you feel like you don't have control of anything, right? My wife just died. My whole world stopped. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do, right? So the only thing I could control, the only things I could control, I did. And so selling my house, I could control that. Where I lived, I could control that. What I wore, I could control that. Where my kids went to school, I could control that. I could control when I went back to work and things like that. So I was looking for some sort of control in my life because I felt like it was completely out of control. And people were sensitive to that, and they were helpful. But I had a lot of friends, because when you're grieving, your friends kind of behind the scenes talk to each other, and everybody looks at each other and says, how do I help? What do I say? Like, I had a lot of friends that wanted to reach out, wanted to say, hey, Ryan, I'm so sorry. Terrible thing to say, by the way. Don't say you're sorry. I used to think people are like, hey, man, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, you're not. Don't tell me you're sorry, because that means you did something wrong. Don't tell me you're sorry, or I'll make you sorry. That's the anger, right?
Yeah.
So I had a lot of friends tell me, hey, man, I'm so sorry. And they wouldn't reach out because they were afraid. And they're like, well, what do I even say? Like, what do I say to somebody that just had their spouse pass away? It's so far out of the realm of normal life. It's just hard to put yourself in that situation. And the best thing you can do in that situation is just reach out. Even though you don't know what to say, it's going to sound awkward, it's going to sound forced. I was happy that my friends were there for me when I needed them, right? Like, they would reach out, simple things, they would text me, hey, did you eat today? How's your day going? You know, just little tiny things that my wife used to text me, you know. I didn't have anybody doing that anymore. And so it was nice to know my friends were there. Or they would call me and they would ask me, what are you learning? They're like, this last week, looking back, what are you learning? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I can't even think. And they're like, no, that's not a good answer. They wouldn't let me off the hook. They're like, think about it. Really, really think about it. What are you learning this week? Going through what you've been through, what are you learning? And that was incredible. I was very grateful my friends did reach out, but there's a lot of people that get really nervous and don't reach out, and they feel bad, and they're like, yeah, I meant to text, right? I just didn't know what to say. It doesn't matter what you say. Just say it. And if you say something wrong, there's going to be anger and whatever. That's just how it is. When you're going through grief, there's anger. There's a lot of emotions. Don't take it personally. You just got to be there, show up for them, and just let them know you're there.
Right. And just because of that anger, it doesn't mean that you're going to make decisions super fast. And it doesn't mean that you're going to make decisions where you're going to stop living like I did.
Right.
Right. We have to be careful in how we grieve as well. Now, nobody can tell you how to grieve. Everybody's different. But don't stop living.
Right.
Either.
Yep. One thing that was really nice is when Maida and I started dating, we both kind of understood each other. We both had a spouse pass away. And so we kind of did little therapy sessions with each other. We would talk about our spouse, because when you're dating, talking about your spouse, it's difficult. Nobody really wants to talk about them, right? Like, when we've said that before, everybody's weird about it. It was nice to talk about your spouse and talk about how you're feeling and just get validation on how you're feeling. You're like, I'm so upset. No, that's valid. That's valid. It doesn't make sense, but it's a valid feeling. Or you're just super depressed and you've just got this weight on your shoulders. That's a valid feeling. It may not make logical sense, but that's how you feel. Don't judge it. That's just how it is. And that's part of moving through that tunnel. And so when we found each other, that's really, I think, when a lot of my healing took place, because I needed somebody else to confide in and that could help me through that process, because I was shutting down. I said, you know what, we're logical. I'm going to make this work. I was putting all of my energy into work, coming home, and I love my kids. I wanted to be with my kids, but I didn't have the energy for that. And so my brother and my mom and stuff, they would play with the kids, and I would go sit in my room and just stare at the wall or mindlessly watch TV and just exist. And I needed somebody to get me out of that cycle.
Right. And I think it's okay that sometimes we go out and we get out of the house and talk to an adult.
Right.
Right. Because me as a widow, I was just home, just like you. with my kids, and one of them was a baby, a newborn. The other one was 2, didn't know how to speak. And the other one was a teenager that was 12. And
he was grieving.
He was grieving. And so it was also really nice to go out with you and not say, oh, I'm forgetting about my husband, I'm moving on. It wasn't about that. It was about being able to talk to somebody that wasn't going to judge you,
Right.
or that you were not going to get mad at me if I said, you know what, I miss my husband, right? Because on a normal date, you can't just say to somebody that hasn't gone through it, oh, I miss my husband so much today.
Right.
That just doesn't happen. You don't say that. But you understood what I was saying.
Right.
And with you, I felt so confident enough to just get out of my comfort zone and tell you what I was feeling. And I felt okay telling you, today I miss my husband. And even today, right? Even up to this day, I still tell you, it's one of those days where I miss Tyler so much.
Yep.
Right? Or I miss things that we used to do. I remember before I met you, I was so angry because, let's see, he died in the winter. I was so angry when spring came.
Yeah.
And spring is one of my favorite seasons. I was mad because I was like, how is it that so many changes are happening, but my husband is not here? I don't want the sun to come up. I don't want the flowers to grow, and I don't want anybody to do anything fun because Tyler isn't here. Or the first summer, I was like, why am I feeling warm? It's gotta stay the same. I still want it to snow. It's supposed to be cold because that's how it was when he died. Or the first fall was terrible because I was like, I can't do this without him. Or the first Thanksgiving, the first of everything is terrible. And you don't want to do it. You don't want to do Christmas. You don't want to celebrate birthdays. You don't want to do anything because you're like, if my husband is not here with me, I can't celebrate it. Mm-hmm. He loved going to Disney, whether it was Disneyland or Disney World. That was one of his hobbies, let's say it. And I did not want to go to Disney World. I did not. Anything Disney, I was like, I'm not doing that. Because I felt like I was disrespecting him by doing things that he loved doing, and he wasn't there to enjoy it. Or when I went to Europe as well. I went to Europe the year after he died, and me looking at new things, I felt so guilty because he wasn't there to enjoy them with me. And I felt sad inside, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, but I'm not supposed to be having fun because he's not here. So don't do that to yourself. Right. Like, enjoy life. Keep moving. Keep enjoying things. Even if they're not here with us, we can still enjoy life for them. And that's what it made me feel better doing things, was that instead of saying, oh, I shouldn't do this and feel guilty about it, I said, I'm going to enjoy life for him. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna still do things and things that we dreamed about in honor of him. I'm going to go to Disney and enjoy it in honor of him. And it doesn't mean that you have to do everything in honor of the person that you lost, right? It doesn't mean that. That just made me feel better. But it means you can still enjoy life. You can still move forward. You can still do things that you like to do. You can still go out and meet people. You can still go out and make new friends. You're not cheating on your spouse. You're not forgetting about your sister or your brother that you lost if you start making new friends. You're not forgetting about them if you go out and you're having fun, and for one day maybe you don't think about them because you're having so much fun. It doesn't mean that you have forgotten them. It just means that you are moving forward, and that's what you're supposed to be doing, is moving forward. They want us to move forward. I'm pretty sure that if we could talk to them, if there was like a phone, wherever they are, and we could talk to them, they would want us to be happy. They would want us to be doing things that we like to be doing. They would want us to move forward in life and not just stay inside our house in a room doing nothing.
Right.
Right? I think every time I was doing something and I felt guilty, I started thinking, well, he would want me to be happy. He would want me to enjoy life. He would want me to do this with the kids. This is what he would do. And that made me feel a lot better about doing things. But that's one way that you can stop living life is by feeling guilty that that person is not with you and you're doing it.
I was going to say, especially around the holidays, it's really hard because Asia passed away the day before Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, I was alone, right? I had my kids, but with family, but I was alone. And when you're with your family, when you're in those big groups, when you go to friends' parties, when you're at work parties, whatever, you suddenly realize how alone you really are. You do all these things that you normally do with your spouse and they're not there anymore. And it's really, really tempting to not go to the parties, to not continue on with life, to say, you know what, I'm not going to go this year and be held back and stop living because they're not there anymore. And it, you know, I said, you know what, I'm going to go, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to show up for myself. And you get there and you feel alone in a room full of people. You can be surrounded by friends, family, people that genuinely love you. And you're hopelessly alone. You're standing there by yourself and it hurts because everything is a reminder that you're alone now and why everything should suck and how life is just terrible in that moment. But you got to get through it. You got to move forward. You keep going to these parties. You keep meeting people. You keep going out because you need to go and enjoy life, and eventually things get better. You do have fun. You start getting validation. You start finding the people that you need to meet. And yeah, your spouse does want you to enjoy life and have fun, and that's how you deal with it. Is you feel that emotion because that's how you feel, and that's okay and that's valid.
Right. I'm pretty sure anybody that we've lost, they want us to keep going. Yeah. They don't want us to just stop and cry for them 24/7. Mm-hmm. They want us to be happy. And I think what's important here and is worth mentioning is that especially when you lose a spouse, you don't know where to put that love.
Right.
And if you don't know where to put it in, and you're in that position where you've lost your spouse, love yourself.
Right.
Because you're worth it.
Yep.
That depression, all that sadness makes you feel that like you're not worth it. Like maybe you don't deserve anything anymore. Maybe you don't deserve to smile. Maybe you don't deserve to be happy. Yes, you do. And they want you to be happy. And you are worth it. Every bit of it. So like Ryan said, get out, get up, get ready, and start living life again.
Right. Go to the gym. Put on your makeup. Buy nice clothes. Buy a new wardrobe. Go have fun. Go on a trip. I mean, that's one of the best therapeutic things you can do is go on a trip. Just go have fun. Just get out there and experience something new. And if you feel guilty, you feel guilty. But then recognize, hey, you know what? I'm still here. They're not, they're not gone completely. They're there, part of your life. You're going to bring them along with you in your heart. But you can't stop living because they did, right? I know there's a lot of people that I've talked to that their spouse passed away, and they said, oh, no. That was my one and only. They were my soulmate. I'm never moving on from them. You're stuck. You're stuck in that tunnel. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's so much sweeter, so much better than you could possibly imagine, but you'll never get there if you don't let yourself get there. You got to have self-love. You got to take care of you. And you got to say, you know what? I'm going to go out. I'm going to meet people, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it.
Right. No, and I like how you said it, that you got to love yourself. And I've said that a lot. And that's what has helped me. Because if you would see me 3 years ago, I was a mess. And I don't want to say that out loud anymore because I don't want to become a mess again. Mm-hmm. But I did not want to get ready at all. I was always in my pajamas all day long. And it's pretty valid. My husband had passed away.
Yeah.
I had a broken leg. I had a newborn. What else was I going to do, right? But then I understood that life keeps going. Mm-hmm. My kids are growing. I don't want them to grow up, see me stuck. I don't want to miss those moments with them. honestly, with my newborn, I don't remember the first year of his life because it was all a blurred. I was basically just surviving. And I regret that. I regret not being able to enjoy that moment with him. Enjoy that moment where he was a newborn and he was so little and he just fit in my arms and those newborn stages. I missed that, and I was waiting for so long for such a perfect pregnancy, for such a perfect baby, because when he was born he was so healthy, so perfect. He's the one that looks the most like his dad, and I don't remember anything because I was so lost in my thoughts and so lost in how much so lost in the fact of how much I missed my husband.
Yeah.
And how he was missing the moments with his kids. And I said, it's not worth it. It doesn't matter anymore. It does matter. Your kids, the world is still moving. Earth is still revolving around the sun. So you cannot just stay there. As hard as it is, just get up and keep going.
Yeah. When you're going through it, you let yourself feel those emotions. You can be mad, you can be sad, depressed, whatever. Like I know I'm like, man, I just want to go to my room, hide under a blanket, and just stop existing. And so I would go to my room, hide under a blanket, and sit there. And about 10 minutes later, I'm like, all right, I'm done. I'm done feeling that way. And I'd get up and do something else. But eventually, when you allow yourself to feel like the world's ending, to feel everything that you feel on the magnitude that you need to, eventually you're going to hit that point where you say, all right, I'm done with that. Like, that's enough. And then you can move forward, right? One of the biggest things Maida and I did recently was we wanted a fresh start for our family. We moved across the country. We used to live in Utah. Now we live in Florida. We just up and left. And now we're here. We didn't know anybody. We didn't have any friends or family out here, really. New house. We actually are in a house we didn't see before we got into it. And it's just a fresh start completely, right? We want to just 100% clean slate, move forward. And it's actually been really nice. It's been really nice because it's allowed us to grow together as a family and rely on each other. And we don't have constant reminders of, that's the hospital they died at. That's where we used to go for birthdays. That's the cemetery, right? We get to move forward. They're not forgotten, and they never will be. But we get to live our life. Now that's our story, and I've really enjoyed being out here because it's a fresh start, and it's really nice to have that.
And honestly, like if you would have told me that a year ago or 2 years ago, hey, why don't you move and go somewhere else and start fresh? I would have said, what a terrible idea.
Yeah.
But once I did it, it was like a huge burden was lifted off of me. It just feels amazing to start fresh. It feels amazing to move and basically to a whole new world out here in Florida. And it feels so good. I feel good. I feel like if I would have done this before, maybe I would have been a lot healthier mentally, emotionally. But I also get it that I wasn't ready. I get it. I wasn't ready. And if you're not ready, don't make huge decisions like that.
Right.
Right. So don't I'm not telling you move or sell your house like Ryan did. But I'm telling you, take your time and realize that you are opening a new book, and allow yourself to end the chapters of your life that you had with your loved one that passed away. And it's okay to end the chapter let's say it in a way that you feel the most comfortable with, and close it and hold it close to your heart and open a new book and start writing those new chapters. And that is so exciting to know that I have all these many pages to fill and chapters to fill in our new life, in our whole new world. Mm-hmm. And it just feels great to be moving forward, because now I feel like I'm starting to live again. And that's just what life is about. It's about staying strong, grieving. Grief is, you're going to learn to live with grief. I'm not saying that just because we moved here, we're not grieving anymore. We're still grieving, and we're always going to grieve. I still miss my husband terribly. I miss him when I go to Disney World. I miss him when I'm doing things that he liked to do, or I'm eating something at his favorite place or whatever. I still miss him. I miss him every day. There's no day that I don't think about my husband. And I'm sure it's the same way for you. But that just means that I have him in a very sacred part of my heart. That's where I hold him. And that's where I hold all of our memories. And remembering is okay, because remembering all those memories is like living them all over again. And then I can put it back, close the book, and put it back in my heart. But I can still live. I can still be excited. I can still be excited for the future and have new goals.
Yeah. Never stop moving forward. Even if it's one step at a time, keep moving forward. That's the big message we really want to leave you with. If you can't plan a year out, plan a month. If you can't do that, go a week or a day or an hour or a minute. I know it's difficult. I know it's a struggle, and it's hard to get through it. Just take 1 second at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time. Just take one step at a time.
And write it down. Like having a journal of what you're doing every day, it helps so much. Because I don't know if you went through that, but my memory went so bad.
Oh, it went
I
terrible.
had a widow fog, is what they call it. And so I would forget so many things. And so I had to write everything down, or I had my friend write it for me. Having a calendar works. And just, for me, I was going hour per hour. That's how I was living for maybe 2 years. And that's what helped me, is that I didn't have to worry about what am I going to do tomorrow, or what am I going to do next month? How am I going to survive, right? Because I was left in a really tough situation with the business and whatnot, and a newborn, and so I didn't want to worry about, oh my gosh, what am I going to do when the baby's born? How am I going to survive? How are we going to live? I didn't want to worry about that. I wanted to worry about what was I going to do to be able to still be there for my kids and make life worth it. And so I lived minute by minute, and I would look at my little paper, and I would be like, okay, so at this time, this is what I'm doing. For now, I'm just existing. I'm being here in the moment. I'm here with my baby. I'm breastfeeding my baby, or I gotta go pick up my child from school. That's what helped me. And that is okay. Don't think about the next day, and don't think about the next 3 hours if you don't want to. Think about the moment and just live in the moment. Don't look at the past if it hurts too much. Don't worry about the present if it gives you too much anxiety. Just live in the moment, in that very moment. Because those moments you're not going to want to miss, especially when you're going through hard times. Sometimes we go blind. We don't see, we don't hear, we don't believe anything. Just focus and don't forget about yourself. You're still living and you're still worth it.
Yep. You're not alone. That's why we want to be here with you. We're in this moment here for you. So we appreciate you taking the time to watch us. And this has been 8 Rice Up. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.